Good afternoon and welcome to Quest Connect. My name's Allison Boyle, I'm one of the facilitators at Quest for Life, and it's lovely to hang out and spend some time with you on this glorious, well it's glorious in Sydney, afternoon. Happy New Year, because it's my first ability to connect with you in 2025, and I'm just wondering what that's been like for you. Going into 2025, do you feel connected to what's important to you? And that's the territory that we're going to explore together today. So we'll just allow a minute or so for people to perhaps jump on who are going to join us live. And we'll just take a moment to arrive, and we'll do that by coming to our senses. This little practice that I'm sure that you've done many times before if you're a regular to our Quest online programs, can have the capacity just to help us settle, to ground ourselves and bring ourselves back to the present moment. So if you would like to close your eyes, do so, but you don't have to. You don't have to change your posture, but just start by taking 3 conscious breaths. Just really having that sense of arriving, letting go of everything that's gone before, the busyness, the conversations, and just acknowledging that at this time there's nothing to do, nowhere to be. And just see if you can connect in with your sense of touch. Touch of clothing against your skin. Any air against your skin. Perhaps what your hands might be touching. Temperature that your clothes might create. And then consciously shift your awareness to any tastes in your mouth or sensations in the mouth. Last cup of tea, coffee, whatever it might be. Any aromas that might be in the air. Anything you can see, even if your eyes are closed. Light, dark, squiggles. Or if you're looking around the room, what can you see in the room that you're in? Not needing to label it or think about it, just notice what's there. And then take your awareness to your sense of hearing. Notice any sounds close by. Sounds that perhaps your own body's making, the sound of your breathing, sound of your digestion, sounds in the room, and not needing to label them or even think about them, just recognize it as sound. Sounds that are further afield outside the room. And just see if you can let the sounds come and then let them go. Maybe you can pick up another sound. And back to your breath. Again, just following 3 conscious breaths. Perhaps with an emphasis on the breath out. Just seeing if you can make the breath out a couple of seconds longer than the breath in. This is really useful in terms of relaxing our nervous system. And maybe finishing with a sigh. And just bring yourself back to the room. and just notice what you notice as a result of doing that little practice that took us about 4 minutes. Have you noticed anything different? It doesn't have to be better than, or just notice what's there as a result of doing that little practice. And that little practice is really about helping us to connect with ourselves, because up until we take the moment to come to, 4 minutes of quiet, focusing on our senses, up till then, maybe we've been quite busy. Maybe we've been involved in other activities and thinking about things. So that little practice just brings us back to the here and now and helps us to connect a little bit with what's going on internally. If you have a really busy mind, when you sit to do the little practice, you're like, oh, goodness me, that's busy up there. So it's just increasing your awareness. Okay, so now that we've settled ourselves a little bit, what are we going to talk about today? Well, given that it's still quite early on in 2025, question, what would you like to connect more of this year going forward? And sometimes, of course, at the beginning of the year, that can get expressed as a goal. It can get expressed as a habit that you might want to develop, or a habit that you might want to drop. It can get expressed as an intention, or sometimes we call them resolutions. And often these resolutions, habits, intentions, they often fail for many reasons. Maybe they're not specific enough. Maybe they're too big, trying to do too much at once. Or maybe we set a kind of unrealistic intention because it's not really what we want deep down. I don't know if you can relate to this. I think it's part of the human experience that often we might set intentions or goals about the things that we think we should do or that we should want. And in this instance, perhaps we're really having difficulty connecting more deep down with what our own wants and needs. Because often when we take on the shoulds, I really should lose weight, exercise more, I shouldn't drink as much, whatever the shoulds are, and there's usually many of them, often it's somebody else's version of you, it's what you've taken on as this would be a thing to do or not do. So if this resonates, we're going to talk about why this might be the case. So this is looking at connection a little bit differently. It's framing it up in the sense of getting in touch more with our own true wants and needs, rather than what might be kind of on the surface about, what we think we should do. And let's first of all place connecting with those wants and needs, connecting with ourselves and our true desire or our true purpose, whatever it might be. Let's place it in. So connection to self. Now, if we go back, connection with self really begins with ourselves as newborns. And we connected to the world by our senses. Our taste, touch, sight, smell, hearing. And of course, we attached to our primary caregiver through those senses, by the quality of their touch, by the frequency and the quality of their eye contact, by their vocal tone, and the way in which our needs were met. Was it met effortlessly and lovingly? Or was it kind of rushed? Was it met with efficiency? Or was it met with, it's kind of like a bit of a hassle, or even perhaps, there was neglect or gross inconsistency, whatever it might be. So the quality and consistency of this first connection lays the fertile ground for other experiences to follow, because only 15% of our brain is wired up when we first arrive on the planet, and the rest gets wired up based on experience and the quality of those connections that we take in through our senses. So if we feel safe and secure, then we explore our environment, we have new experiences, so we make new connections, new neural pathways in our brain, and we feel confident to explore the world. And of course, we all had to adapt to the circumstances in which we were born into. And to identify our adult wants and needs, we may need to get under the layers of that learning and conditioning that happened way back then. So consider, in your particular family, what were the messages that you internalized when you were growing up? Because these are often where some of those shoulds come from. And we often laugh about these things, like we had people round for dinner the other night and we were talking about how in different families it's like, you really should, you really have to, eat all your dinner, okay, because there's children starving in the world, okay, that's a great, it's a great value to be concerned about the children starving in the world. But we were having a bit of a laugh because when you were tiny we couldn't imagine who these children were. And it was often in the UK, and we talked about, the terrible plight of people in Africa, the Biafrans, and of course we didn't understand who they were, what they were, but we knew we had to eat our dinner and eat it all because of something that was happening to them, right? But there was a should in there. So our parents, of course, have to provide boundaries and have to do things to prevent us harming ourselves. I mean, you really should look both ways before you cross the road. That makes perfect sense. But we can take that on board in many, many different ways about the shoulds. So the patterns of thought and actions you developed just to fit in, can you identify those? What was it that you were picking up on in terms of maybe what was valued in your family? If academia was valued, maybe you wanted to be the clever one. If sport was valued, maybe you wanted to be the sporty one. If art was valued, then maybe that was what was pursued. Of course, this isn't literal. Sometimes, because some kids took on the message that being the clever one was valued and they didn't feel as though they could live up to that, maybe you did something else. Maybe you became the funny one in order to get your needs met. Okay, maybe you became the black sheep, okay, because you were still going to get attention for doing that. So what were some of these messages and patterns that we picked up on when we were tiny wee? So these assumptions that we all may have taken on as fact, if I don't look after the needs of other people, I won't get my needs met. Maybe it's time to challenge some of that now. Then in some families, of course, things didn't go so smoothly. So what if one or both parents were absent because there may have been a death, there may have been a separation, maybe someone wasn't emotionally available because there was postnatal depression or whatever it might be. Maybe there was childhood neglect, maybe there was chaos or even abuse. A child might then realise that the best way to stay in relationship and in order to survive is by devoting themselves to actually meeting the parents' needs, adopting a role in that way. And when we adopt these roles, looking after other people's needs before our own, or looking after the emotional needs of a parent, we then start to lose contact with our own wants and needs. And this can even include defining ourselves based on what we do, meeting the needs for others, in order to keep parents happy and to keep that attachment, rather than who you actually are, your authentic self. So we often talk about the loss of our authentic self because in some way it might not have been acceptable. And think about everyday things that happen, with children, when some children may have been told that, come on now, big boys don't cry. Or, come on now, you're getting too excited, even if you're having a joyful moment, And maybe as an adult, you then start to feel a little bit oh, I'm not too sure if I can really let go and really get into this wholeheartedly, you know, because that was maybe pushed down a little bit in order to fit in. So we all do these adaptations and in order to be taken care of in our family of origin and in order to get our needs met. And doing so, of course, can make it difficult to sometimes connect with our own authentic wants and needs. According to Rick Hansen, an American psychologist who is involved a lot with called neurodharma, so looking at Buddhist teachings and how that marries in with neurology. He's a neuro psychologist. He talks about having three basic needs, that we all have three basic needs: need for safety, need for satisfaction, and need for connection. So thinking about those safety needs, that can be anything from our raw survival to knowing that we won't be attacked if we speak up, and that might not have always been the case in different family of origin. And also satisfaction may have been about just having enough, you know, having enough to eat, feeling that life's worth living. So, you know, we approach rewards, and that can be small things like feeling satisfied when you've done the housework or you've got the shopping in or when you've had a really good chat with someone. And then need for connection. And that can be from expressing authentic sexuality to feeling worthy and loved. And we take care of this need by attaching to others. Texting a friend, feeling understood, or giving and receiving compassion, self-compassion and compassion to others. So let's start to think about connection to self. And I want to just put out kind of like a few reflective questions for you to consider. How do you connect with yourself? And what are the qualities of that connection? Do you relate to yourself with self-compassion and kindness? Or is there part of you that relates to yourself with self-criticism? I mean, most of us do that. Okay. But what's the overall pattern of the connection to yourself? You know, is that little voice in your head? Is it supportive and kind, or is it critical? How do you connect with your body? Again, most of us have been trained, you know, by society and the media to sometimes be really critical and judgmental of our bodies because they're, I don't know, they're too big, they're too small, they're whatever. And then as you get a bit older, maybe they start to play up a little bit. And sometimes we can get quite annoyed or frustrated with them. But I mean, our bodies actually are amazing. I mean, they're this amazing self-healing kind of spacesuit that we journey through planet Earth. So what's our relationship? Do we treat it well? Do we nurture and cooperate with it? Or do we try and control it? Can you be by yourself? That's a big one. You know, can you be quiet by yourself? Or is there a tendency to distract yourself? Because when you sit, maybe some uncomfortable feelings come up, or your thoughts start to run riot and you start ruminating, or, you know, what's happening? So, you know, just to think about what is perhaps the feeling that you don't like, or the sensation that you don't like when you spend time by yourself and try and get quiet. It might be feelings of loneliness, sadness, boredom, self-criticism. So there's no judgment here. This is just trying to approach this with a degree of curiosity so that we can get a little bit more awareness. So connecting with ourselves does involve becoming more aware of what's there. We might not always be all that comfortable with it, but it's just getting more familiar with that territory and noticing what you do, perhaps, in order to distract yourself. So trying to spend some time for quiet reflection to connect with what's really going on internally. And it can be hard because often up come the shoulds, you know. I really should do and go X, you know. There's a lot of positive strokes, if you like, for being busy, um, for working very hard and working after hours. It might be caring for others, you know. It might be getting quiet is one way to get in touch with that internal voice that actually does know what your wants and needs are. So how do we do that? Well, again, you know, spending some time coming to your senses, engaging the body in something like yoga, walking, swimming, you know, getting some movement. It might be in the garden, it might be something creative, you know, any of the present time activities that engage your senses. I often think too, if you're struggling to think, well, what does light me up or what do I like doing? And I had to do this a few years ago. I think, well, what was it that I really liked doing when I was a kid? You know, because when we get caught up in the busyness of work or caring for others, again, our own needs and the things that did bring us joy, sometimes it's hard to remember what they were. So thinking about what did you really like when you were a kid? And for some people, that's going to be, I really liked drawing or painting. For me, I remembered I really liked that feeling when I was out playing on my bike. And remembering the feeling was ultimately one of the things that got me back into cycling, which I now really enjoy. It's one of my favourite things to do. So what are the interests that you've pushed away or pushed down? And what's the story around that? That, you know, you can't have that, or that's for other people. I mean, I remember thinking, I wonder if I'm too old to get back into cycling, you know, because I was a bit mature at the time. Or, and this is often a big one, no, I can't do that because I'm not good at it. I don't know if any of you have got that one going on, but I know I've certainly struggled with that one. Well, there's part of me that's interested in X, but I don't think I'd be very good at it. And we pull away before we've even given it a go. So notice the story. And again, is that a familiar pattern? Is that an old story? And can we challenge that now? You know, it's especially if that's a story that we may have developed way back when. You know, we don't need to live out of that anymore. You know, so is that true now? Is that really true, or could I give it a go? What assumptions are we making? So connecting with ourselves. We often have difficulty pursuing those things that we might have an interest in, not only because we're worried that we're not going to be good at them, but sometimes we worry about what other people might think about us getting involved in this, you know? And even noticing that is awareness, you know? Does it really need to be that much of a concern? So connecting with ourselves is one aspect. The second aspect is connecting to others, those that we share life with, you know, our loved ones, our friends, our pets, our interest groups. And when we think about our loved ones, you know, we often say at Quest, if you were born into, you know, the family, our family that really got you, you know, you're very lucky. Most people, Patria would say, are not necessarily born into the family of their spirit, you know. If you were, that's great. So our loved ones might be those people that we collect around us. It might be our friends. It might be people that we connect with through an activity. So those that you share life with, so that inner circle, our loved ones. Who are those people, and they may only be, you know, one or two of them, that you can really be your authentic self with, that you could say virtually anything to? Or who are the people, and again, there might only be one or two of them, that when you spend time with them, you feel uplifted and you feel really heard, you feel understood, you feel met, seen in some way. And who are the people that you spend time with, even if you like them, even, you know, that actually drain you? You know, I call them the energy vampires, you know. And as I say, I've got people in my life that, you know, fit that category for me. I like them. I don't want to, you know, get them out of my life. But if I'm prioritizing my own needs and my own energy going forward, then I might need to think about how much time, you know, I give those people, because every time you leave their company, you feel absolutely drained and exhausted. So there's that inner group, those that you can really be yourself with. And there then might be an extension to that, where there might be people who we connect with through an activity, something you're interested in. So that might be people you've met because you've joined a local choir, or it might be people that you've met through an art class, or it might be people that you've met, for me, could be people that I cycle with or I go bushwalking with. And these people might not be my closest friends, but they're kind of my tribe because we've got this mutual interest. And sometimes friendships, close friendships, develop out of that. Often relationships develop out of that. And the quality of those connections can be a little bit different. It's sort of like things that I might achieve going on a bushwalk, I can only achieve because there's a group of us there that I couldn't achieve by myself. You know, none of us does anything on their own, really. Okay. So what's the quality of those connections? It's sort of like, have you found your tribe yet? People who kind of get you. And connections are interrelated. I love this part. Because often when you connect with others in order to pursue an interest that you have, then you go there for that reason, to bushwalk, to do the art class, to engage in the choir, and you're not necessarily there to meet friends, but then sometimes you do. And then you've got a personal connection, and you've got the connection of the larger of your tribe. So again, you might start a yoga class to practice mindful movement to help you connect with your body, because through awareness you've realized that you don't have such a great relationship to your body because you're living up here all the time. But then you enjoy the relaxation at the end of the yoga class, and that quietens the mind. And then you start to develop that space internally to really hear that quiet, still voice that knows what you need. And or maybe you develop a connection with someone else in the yoga class and you start going for coffee afterwards. You know, I love that those type of connections become interrelated. You know, it's fabulous. So we've talked about a connection with yourself. We've started to talk about a connection to others. And what about now a connection with something bigger than yourself? Now, I'm going to call that nature, but for some people that might have a religious quality. For other people it might have a other element about the way they experience spirituality. But if you think about connecting with something bigger than yourself, I think about it as, where do you experience that sense of awe? You know, that awe which is inspiring, okay? It's awe-inspiring. Some people experience that through art, looking at an artwork. Some people experience it through music. Some people experience it, like me, through maybe bushwalking and getting to the top of a mountain. And you're standing at the top of the mountain thinking privately how fabulous you are, that you've achieved this thing to get to the top of the mountain. Then you get there and you see that, oh, there's that mountain there, there's that one there, there's that one there. And we've got this whole vista, and in some way, I'm so insignificant in the bigger picture of all this. You know, all my thoughts, all my worries, all my concerns, you know, actually, they're small in comparison to holding that spaciousness. And that sense you get when you look at a great view, or for some people it might be looking at the night sky and staring into space, looking at the stars. You know, that whole sense of wonder, you know, like, how did these mountains get here? Or how did these stars get here? And there's so many of them when you leave the city and you go bush and you look at the night sky. For other people, it might be looking at clouds and different cloud formation. Whatever it is, you might experience it in your garden when you've planted something and now it's come to fruition. It's like, oh wow, it's like giving birth. It can be awe-inspiring. So how do you connect with that? And it's often my observation when people come to Quest, and people don't usually come to Quest when things are going well. And my observation is often that they've lost a sense of connection with themselves, or for some people, they've never really had a connection with, what's going on in here. They've been working very hard up in their heads, and they may not have a connection with their bodies. And often when we talk about that sense of, what really lights you up, or feeding and nourishing your spirit, it's amazing as the week progresses, it is almost like people start to remember what has lit them up in the past, even if they haven't connected to that for a long time, even if they're not doing it now. But often for people, there is some kind of memory or felt sense that it used to feel really good when I did X, or I used to really be connected with this, and either I don't do it anymore or I can't do it anymore because I've got a change in my body or whatever it might be. But even having that discussion allows people to think kind of a little bit outside the square about what really is inspiring to me, what really is awe-inspiring, and how could I nourish and how could I feed that a little bit more. So we've got these 3 levels of connection, and we've got these 3 qualities. And if anything I've been talking about has brought up any sort of difficult feelings, and particularly judgment around, oh goodness, I don't even know what matters to me, okay, try and just see that as useful information, all right? Just try and don't add any, criticism to that. And when you do get a sense of what you would like to engage with more in 2025, what your heart is yearning for, it can be useful to ask yourself, all right, so what is it that really matters? If I'm being honest, if I can take the shoulds out of it, what is it that really matters? And you can think about that in terms of these 3 different levels of connection: connecting to self, connecting to others, connecting to something bigger than yourself. Out of those 3 levels, what really, really matters to me? And then the other question, and why is that important to me? Why is it important? Why does it seem significant? If I engage with that thing a little bit more, what is it I want to gain? Because these are the things that are motivating, actually. What do I want to gain by doing that? I don't want to just, it's not just for its own sake. What do I really want to get out of that? And often thinking about that in terms of how do I want to feel moving forward? What do I want to bring more of into my life? Now, for any of you who have been to Quest, you'll know that on Thursday afternoon, we do a lovely exercise. We do a collage, and people sit in community and they flick through some magazines and they rip out pictures that is a visual representation of what they want to bring more of into their life. And we ask people to do this very much at a feeling level, not so much thinking, like what am I drawn to? Like what am I seeing? What are the colours? What are the pictures that I'm seeing? And it doesn't have to be literal. You might rip out a yacht on the ocean, and it's not that you want to go sailing. It might be that for you that represents freedom or spaciousness, whatever. So it's a visual representation. And we ask people to spend the afternoon in community doing that, and we don't ask them to put any words to it until the next day, where they can share a little bit in small groups. And it's absolutely fascinating by allowing that spaciousness of a whole afternoon to just focus on what do I want to bring more of into my life at a feeling level, and then putting the words the next day. It really, really helps crystallize or clarify for people that's the direction I'm going on. But it's something about that. That is where I'm heading. And Patria will often say, it's not your job to kind of worry about how you're going to get there, but to have this clear sense of what matters to me, why is it important, how do I want to feel, and what do I want to gain. It's not your job to figure out how it's going to happen. All right? It might be your job to take 1 or 2 steps towards it in some small way, but we don't always necessarily have to figure it all out. It's there. And what that's doing, that journey, the visual representation, what that's doing, it's actually signalling to our brain what we think is important about moving forward. And we've got a part of our brain called the reticular activating system, down at the more primitive part of the brain, the RAS, that brings to us that which we tell it is important. So it's like an internal kind of antenna. And because we've set an intention, it looks for that. So have you ever, well, I'll tell you a personal example. We've recently bought a new car. And I have never been more conscious of Subaru Foresters being on the road as I have been in the last month. There are thousands of them. Did I notice those Subaru Foresters 6-8 weeks ago? No, right? But I very much doubt that, thousands of people have just gone out and bought one like we have. They've always been there, but I didn't have the eyes to see it. But because I'm focused on it, because we've just got one, then I see them absolutely everywhere. Is that not the case? For those of you that had babies and you were out with prams, did you see other people with prams? Absolutely. And it was like you were drawn to them or they were drawn to you, right? Because you've set your internal antenna for it. Because your brain brings to you that which you tell it is important. So, connection to ourself, others, and what's bigger than ourself, that might be setting our intention going forward. So now we need to start looking for opportunities. Okay, so depending on what you reckon is important, are there opportunities in an online community? Is this something you want to learn and you could learn it online? Is there something that you could learn and you go to a class to learn it, connect with other people? Is there the opportunity on the Quest Facebook? Does that work for you? Is there an opportunity to notice opportunities for connection in your local neighbourhood? Social researcher Hugh McKay talks about this, about connections starting in the hood. And it's just that sense of actually taking notice of who your neighbours might be, people in the street, starting to smile, making eye contact, saying hello, and seeing where that leads you. Okay. So those opportunities for connection, start small. And the other thing that it's equally kind of important for us to notice, because this can start to happen insidiously, and maybe this has been happening to you, is also noticing when we start to disconnect. And I really do think this is insidious. So do we notice when we disconnect from ourselves or others? And how do we do this? Okay. Do we push people away with our bluster? Do we push people away by refusals? Refusing opportunities for connection? Do we refuse help, perhaps, when we could do with it? Do we push people away by doing that? Do we isolate? A lot of people do that when things aren't going so well. because we don't have the energy, we don't want to face people, whatever it might be. So do we isolate? Do we disconnect from ourselves by keeping really, really busy? And that could be with work, that could be just with filling up the diary, so that we're busy and we don't have any time for ourselves or quiet reflection. Do we use substances, cigarettes, alcohol, other drugs, to disconnect? And do we also lose our connection with things that we enjoy doing? Do we stop sitting in the garden? Do we stop doing the gardening? Do we gradually stop doing things that we enjoyed and we thought were important, like having a bit of exercise, going for the walk, haven't done the meditation? You know, it's not about giving yourself a hard time for that. It's about noticing, because these are often the early warning signs that maybe things aren't going so well. These might be, you know, our symptoms of stress, if you like, and that it builds up really insidiously. Do we disconnect as well by spending time scrolling or on our devices? You know, so in that way we're disconnecting from others, but we're also disconnecting from ourselves. It's like being brain dead. And maybe are we choosing just to sit and numb out and endlessly watch things on Netflix? And not that there's anything wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with sitting watching a few shows. I love doing that in the evening. But is it in order to avoid something else, you know? So these are just questions that are important in terms of developing that awareness of are we losing a connection with ourselves or with others? So if we notice that we're starting to go down that kind of slightly slippery slope, excuse me while I have a drink, what can we do? Well, actually we may need some help to reconnect, especially if the disconnection has gone on for quite some time. So we may need help to reconnect by joining a support group in some way. And I'm thinking about just ordinary stuff, you know, like the new mothers groups, for example, where, you know, as the caregiver, you might have been quite isolated for a while because you've been taking care of the needs of this little one. But now you find that the balance is tipped and you're not taking care of your own needs. You have very little social connection. And so how do you reintegrate? Well, maybe by people who are understanding of what you're going through right now, people who are in a similar situation. So support groups for men, it might be something like the men's shed. You know, just men often connect better through an activity or something physical, and they have these incidental, you know, conversations, and that might be a way to start to reconnect. It may be that if this has gone on so long that, you know, you've started to become a little bit anxious or a little bit kind of phobic, and a little bit got a little bit of social anxiety about reconnecting, then maybe some counselling would be helpful. And a counsellor who's empathically attuned, who listens, who really kind of gets you, and using that relationship to help you heal. And particularly, again, if some of these struggles are because of maybe an early rupture in life, then again connecting with a counsellor and using their nervous system and their consciousness to help you heal, perhaps in a relationship, then that can be really useful too. So we've talked about connections from multiple different ways. We've talked about noticing opportunities for connection, starting local sometimes. And then we've talked about noticing when we have a tendency to disconnect from ourselves, from others, and from that which is important to you. So, kind of by way of recapping, that we have a context for connection by exploring our early experiences, reflecting on how we connect with ourselves might encourage us to think back to, how did we connect with our early caregivers? How did we take on some of the patterns, thought patterns, behavioural patterns that we learnt when we were grown up in our families of origin that we took on in order to adapt? What are these, what we might call second nature or automatic patterns, and that includes patterns of thinking, second nature to me to look after everybody else's needs before I look after myself. Well, is that still working now in the current context? So we connect with ourselves and we think about those early experiences, how we connect with others in our world, those that are very close to us, those that we connect with through perhaps shared values or activity, and then connecting with something bigger than ourselves and getting curious about what gets in the way of us truly connecting with our own wants and needs. What might be the story? What might be the self-talk there? Brené Brown, who we often quote at Quest, we like Brené Brown. She is an American social worker, but she's a social worker in research. And she's done a lot of social research, and she talks about connection is why we are here. Connection is what gives our life meaning and what gives it purpose. So I want to leave you with a meditation that we're going to do together in a moment. But I also want to leave you with just those few curious questions around what do I want to bring more of into my life going forward without it being a should. And what actions would I need to take in order to move a little bit closer to that without making it arduous at all? And it might be something really, really simple. So one of the things that I've connected with, and I've been really thinking about this for a while, is that I have a lot of hobbies, interests that involve doing things physically. I really love my bushwalking. I love my little bushwalking buddies. I like cycling. I do that with a group. I also do it with my husband, so it's lovely to connect with him. Often our holidays are involved around cycling, all of that sort of thing. I go to the gym. I don't love going to the gym, but I do my little exercises there that support those other activities, and that's all good. But you can't always do that physical stuff to that degree every day. And what happens when I, from time to time, get a bit of an injury? Or what happens when the weather doesn't allow that to happen? And sure, there are days I'll catch up with people, or I'll go to a movie or whatever. Sure. Visit people and help other people out. Sure. But do I have a stay-at-home activity that I really enjoy? Actually, no. Actually, I don't. And I really think it's a gap. And I have to think about, as I get older, I might not be as physically able as I am now. What's that all about? And in trying to explore that for myself, it's been really fascinating. And when I've tried to talk to other people, like, what do you do on days when you're at home? And they all do stuff that, to be perfectly honest, I think is very worthwhile. I'm just not interested in it. And it's been quite a conundrum. And then even when I have come up against things that maybe, possibly I could be interested in it, it's like I'm forcing myself. My heart's not really there. So I'm in a space of not knowing. I'm in a space of not really knowing what that thing is going to be. And rather than just sitting in that space and feeling like a little bit of a, sort of like, God, I'm a bit of a loser. I can't even think of anything that I like doing at home. So rather than going down that path, which is like very tempting, I've just thought to myself, well, the one step that I've made is to engage with the community college that does evening classes or a day class doing such and such. And rather than me constantly thinking, would I like that? I'm just going to do a few things. You know, I'm going to spend a day learning something, and you know, it might be something to do with cookery, or it might be something, and just seeing how I go and see where it leads, rather than sitting in the conundrum of just not knowing. Okay, so it's like I'm going to put in the ingredients, if you like, and see what emerges, and see how I go. So we often say at Quest, you know, we're not all fixed up. So I've approached this about what do I want to connect with more in 25, and some of it's a mystery to me. And I'm just going to look for opportunities, and I'm just going to try a few things and try not to be too worried if I'm good at it or not, because that's something that often holds me back. So I wish you well in your inquiry around connection and looking for those areas of your life where, yeah, you could maybe shore up your connections a little bit more. But I thought we might finish together just with another brief moment of quiet. And again, if you can just close your eyes if that feels okay for you. Lower your gaze or close your eyes. And start by taking 3 conscious breaths. Just following each breath. Perhaps placing an emphasis on the breath out. Maybe there can be a bit of a sigh. And just letting go of everything you've heard, letting go of the information. Just trust that the information will be there. You don't have to remember it all. But right here, right now, just take your attention inwards. And I'm going to just sort of ask a few curious questions and just see if anything comes up for you. If I didn't have the commitments that I've got, what would I like to be doing? What would I like to bring more of into my life? How would I like to spend the energy that I've got? Where would I like to place my energy? Are there areas of my life that use up a lot of energy? And does it really need to be that way? In order for me to get some of my energy back, what would I need to do? What are some of the things that I used to connect with when I was little that I really loved? Why did I like it? How did it make me feel? What was special about it? Are there any of those things that I could bring into my life now? Even if it looks a bit differently now that I'm older? And if that's the case, why is it important to even consider that? What would I like to gain? What holds me back? from connecting to those things that are my heart's true desire? What are the barriers? Am I worried that I'm not good at it or good enough? Am I worried about what other people think? Have I got some shoulds in the way? Does it feel indulgent? Am I just telling myself I can't have that? And in amongst all that, what's true? And if I connected in some small way to that which I would like to bring more of into my life, what might the feeling be? And what's one small step, one tiny step that I could take towards that? One small step to take towards that commitment to those connections in my own life. Commitment to living. And back to the breath. And then just bring your awareness back into the room, wherever you are. So thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. And yes, good afternoon to you too, Chris. And I'm sure there'll be others join later on. I hope those that are going to join later have had a lovely day, hopefully out in the sun or having a lovely swim or connecting with nature in some way. And thank you very much for giving me your time and your attention. It's always a pleasure to be with you. You're probably aware by now, if you're a regular, that Patria has a meditation, brief meditation session and a little talk on Monday evenings. And that's accessible through Facebook. And on Wednesday at 11 a.m. At home with Quest, so a half hour's dive into some of the Quest teachings. And then this session is the first Sunday of every month. So it's been my great pleasure to spend time and to connect with you. And I'll see you next time. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a pleasant afternoon. Bye-bye.